Picture locking yourself up in a closet or your bathroom and being alone in that contained space, just you, just your thoughts, for hours and hours on end. And people in this country spend days, weeks, years, even in some of the worst case scenarios, decades in that contained space, all alone. A solitary confinement cell can be anywhere from 6 by 8 feet to about 8 by 8 feet, just depending on the facility. If you talk to people who have experienced solitary confinement and also experienced other forms of physical torture, both will tell you that the psychological harm caused by solitary confinement is no less of torture than physical torture.
When I did the 2 years straight, somebody would come up and be like, "Hey man," and I jump and I break into sweats.
I collapsed an artery there, cut myself all the way up there, and it was a stress relief.
Many people think that the reason people go to solitary confinement is because they are the worst of the worst prisoners, the most dangerous. But in fact, it's really oftentimes the severely mentally ill prisoners who are held in solitary confinement in this country. People are sent to solitary confinement not just for acting out in a violent manner, but also for minor rule infractions. And the population of prisoners who do have pre-existing mental illness are often the ones who have the hardest time understanding and following prison rules.
Christian scriptures and the scriptures of all religions say much about the way that we are to treat other human beings, especially the most vulnerable. And all religious traditions teach that it is important to honor and respect the dignity and worth that God has endowed in each human being. When we put people into solitary confinement cells, which we know are going to cause harm, then we have deeply violated that requirement from God to respect and honor each human being.
It's costing our communities as well. When we house people in solitary confinement, it increases their risk of recidivism, and so when they're released back to our communities, it is a threat to public safety.
What do America's prisons say about our nation and its values? What does it say about the number of people we have in prison? What does it say when we consider how we treat the people who are in prison? This is the first ever congressional hearing on solitary confinement.
What he did was huge. It drew national attention to a problem which a number of states are now beginning to work on, some with great success, like Maine, in Colorado, in Mississippi. There are now changes in the policy, and there's now a move toward getting rid of solitary confinement cells. And we were thrilled by it. The religious community played a major role to support it, and will continue to do that.
Meerkat believes that prolonged solitary confinement is wrong, both morally and economically, actually.
In conjunction with those hearings, the National Religious Campaign Against Torture organized a religious fast of people across the country, and it was for 23 hours. And that corresponded to the 23 hours that prisoners spend in solitary confinement. And so we had a press conference with 11 religious leaders, and we broke the fast together with bread. We had folks from the Jewish community, the Muslim community, Catholics, mainland Protestants, and evangelicals, all talking together, almost literally holding hands to say this is a concern for the entire religious community, precisely because this is intentional causing of harm.
It's not only inhumane, but in many circumstances, it really amounts to torture. And that's because, as studies have shown, it can destroy the mind.
We do recognize that there are instances where prisoners, do display behaviors that are truly dangerous, and for a limited period of time, they may need to be held in isolation until the staff is able to come up with behavior modifications or programs that allow that prisoner to modify their behavior. They are able to receive treatment in which they're to a point where they can safely live among other, among the general prison population.
We know from a long history, back to the early 1800s, that solitary confinement makes people go insane. And for us to continue to force prisoners to do that is just cruel and unusual punishment, but more importantly, it's a violation of the values that we believe that God requires that we use to treat each human being.